the possibility to go out and debate in the world and meet teams from all other countries, for me, was a great opening of mind, great opening of my worldview. And I would say, most importantly, it was a great experience of building my own character.
You just heard a great example of why debating can be an important and fun skill to have in your life. In this module, we'd like to explain the basics in debating to you. How can you prepare for a debate? What's a good argument? And what can you do when your emotions tend to overrule your logic? We'll find out in this module. First of all, we'd like to discuss how you can prepare yourself for a debate. What are things you need to keep in mind? Let's have a look.
So let's get into it and let's talk about how you behave in a debate, before the debate and afterwards. So before the debate, which is where a lot of the critical thinking also comes in, you have to prepare. And it's very important to prepare well, because everyone will be able to tell if you're ill prepared. And you'll understand that as you go through life, that preparation is key, and the way that you prepare is also very important. So before the debate, you have to do a lot of research, and it's important to not only research the opinion that you have to be debating on. So for example, if you're affirmative or if you're negative, as in you're debating against an argument or for the argument, you need to prepare for both of the sides, not only one that you might need to present. So if you're on the affirmative team and you have to debate for the uniforms, for example, in schools, you wouldn't only Google and look for information that's for uniforms. You also have to look at the counter arguments of the other side and think of ways that those arguments might be weak, or how you tackle those arguments. So essentially, you're preparing for everything that might occur in that debate and when you're talking to another person. So for example, the very common topic that I just mentioned of having school uniforms, you would go and look at different websites and look at recurring information and recurring arguments for that topic. You'd also pick up factual information, and it's very important to double check factual information. So for example, if it's a statistic of some sort, of, for example, a survey that they did asking students whether they like to have a uniform or not, you'd have to double check of what the source for that information is. I'm sure you've also been already told that Wikipedia is not the best website to check information for, but I think if you scroll down, even in Wikipedia pages, they have sources where they take their information from. And you can look at those primary sources and check for the information that could be useful for you. So you write that down and pick 5 strongest arguments that you'd like to present. You always need to pick more arguments than you actually think you might use or would have the time to use, because the team member that you're in the debate with could use those arguments, and then you're out of arguments essentially. So you need to prepare for more than you expect to use, and then prepare for what the other side might say so you can counter that. And that's where also another life skill comes in, that you're always prepared, and you're prepared to hear what the other side has to say, and that you're not really lost, which makes you feel a lot more confident in the debate.
When you're preparing for a debate, you're also trying to find out which person of your team will take up which role. How can you do this?
Well, I think, in debate, like in many other things in the world, in your life, academic and professional, the teamwork is key. So in debates, it's very important, first of all, to divide well the work between your teammates, and to also see who is stronger in which field. Who is maybe stronger in analytics, who is stronger in terms of digesting information, who is perhaps more persuasive in making concluding remarks, or who is better in rebutting the opponent's arguments. So like in work, so in debate, you win if you manage to pull together the strongest aspects of every debater. And if you manage to channel all of that in your overall strategy. So for me, debating is not only the art of critical thinking, which it is, and the art of tolerance, of tolerating others' opinions and listening and being open-minded to other people's views, but it's also about the teamwork. It's about really learning how to work together. And these skills will be always very, very handy for you for whatever you do later in your life.
And now let's get into what a good argument looks like. So you've done your research, you've prepared, but how do you actually present the argument in a debate? So there's a pretty easy structure that you can follow, and it is to make an argument. For example, students prefer uniforms, and then find a factoid that supports your argument or some research that supports that argument that you're making, that statement that you're making. Which is, for example, a statistic that you found online from a survey that was taken in some school or university. So you could say students actually prefer having school uniforms. For example, a study done by Harvard showed that 80% of the students who went to this specific high school preferred having uniforms rather than not, which showcases that uniforms are actually a good thing. So you would have like a little tiny paragraph of an essay, all condensed into one, where you present an argument. So it would be your thesis, your little argument that you're making, and then the example that you found or the research that supports that argument, and then a quick recap, if you'd like, of that argument that you're making. And that's how you bounce back and forth between arguments, while also including a short recap of what the other person has said. So that's very structured, but the flow actually goes really naturally once you're in the actual debate. And it becomes a lot easier when you follow that structure to make arguments with a good basis with them. So you can't really just say something and expect people to believe you. If it was that easy, everyone could debate really easily. But because you're prepared, you found the research that supports a lot of ideas and a lot of different opinions, you can use that to persuade your opponent and to create a more substantial opinion that convinces them and convinces the audience as well.
Okay, let's say you're fully prepared for your debate. What are things you need to be aware of during the debate?
Well, debate indeed is also an art of discipline and an art of rules. We are living in the rules-based world where, otherwise the countries and the societies and the businesses and individuals would not be able to coexist if they wouldn't be following a set of rules and norms which guide the integrity of our societies. So is also in the debate scene, where every debater needs to follow certain rules, needs to respect each other, and needs to make sure not to use the red lines or the methods which are unacceptable in debates, whether that would be personal attacks ad hominem, whether that would be manipulation of facts, and of course using fake facts and disinformation, whether that would be distortion of information. So it's very important in the debate also to show those methods if they are used and to expose them, and also to expose the logical fallacies of your opponents. And by that, everyone is learning and everyone is becoming stronger as a debater, and using the logic and argumentation in a much more precise way next time around. So it's really very important not only to be open-minded to other people's opinions, but to be vigilant whether the rules are respected.
Another great tip when you're in the debate is to cite your sources. So always give credit where credit is due. If you're citing a statistic, you should really mention where that statistic came from. If you're saying that this school experienced this and this, you need to cite where you read that information. And it's quite difficult That's why practice really does make perfect. And it's very important to prepare before the debate and try to memorize a bit of that information. And what really helps, once you come in to the stage and have the paper that you can use when a person starts speaking, you can jot down the arguments and quickly write down the information and some of the sources and the statistics. So once you're in the debate and you might get nervous, you don't forget them.
We already heard some great advice from our experts. Are there any other tips and tricks you can use during a debate?
Well, I think, spontaneity is very important. Of course, preparation is key to success, but always allow space for spontaneity and your inner, feeling. And sometimes that leads you to really great speech and great performance if you allow this creativity to appear at the last minute and last moment, despite your great preparation and all the quotes and the information that you gathered before the debate. So allow debate to take you forward and allow the flow and the spontaneity of it really capture you.
Okay, being spontaneous is important and it helps you to stay focused. But when you're in a debate and you want to respond to an argument of an opponent, how can you do that?
So active listening entails quickly recapping what your opponent has said. So if they mention an argument and it's going to be a bit lengthier, you can summarize it in a few words or in just a sentence, and then you counter it with another argument. What that shows your opponent is that you've listened, you understood their argument, and that you counter it, and you have an argument to counter it with, that you're just not spitting some new information out. And what that also gives you, it gives you those couple of seconds of more time to really think about it in your head and to find the perfect counter argument for what the other person has told you. And this is a lifelong skill to have that you'll be learning in the debate, is to listen to another person and to respond in a way that shows that you've listened to what they had to say. And it's of course a lot more convincing to showcase that you've listened to another person and that you're just not spitting out some arguments that you found.
We heard a lot of great advice that you can use during one of your debates. But maybe the experts also have some advice about what you certainly shouldn't do.
Although there are actually some things that you should not do in a debate, or you should at least try to avoid doing, because they remove from a convincing manner of speaking. So for example, you shouldn't really get too emotional. Yes, you can sometimes get really passionate, especially when you're arguing against another person, but it's very important to keep your cool and yes, to be passionate about the ideas that you're presenting, but to not get angry or upset at your opponent. You need to keep a cool head, because that's more convincing than someone raising their voice or showing really strong emotions. And what also comes with that is that you really shouldn't use personal life stories as a very convincing manner of drafting or creating an argument. So you really shouldn't use personal stories that could make other people sad or that are a bit anecdotal. Yeah, you can put in one in a debate, but you need to know that you can't base all of your arguments off of personal experiences, because some other person might have different personal experiences and those aren't really convincing. So try to stay off really personal topics or personal anecdotes when you're debating, and try not to get too emotional or angry or upset, because that doesn't really convince people. Keep a cool head and yeah, be passionate about the topic that you're debating, but don't get lost in your feelings and emotions, because that will remove from your argument.
It's very difficult, I think, for every one of us not to take it personally, but you have to do so. You have to really distance yourself from your emotions and really try to take any debate, any discussion to the level of arguments and not to the level of emotions, to the level of ideas and not to the level of individuals where, people are taking an argument against themselves. That is a wrong path to take. It's difficult, but it's possible. I think one of the tactics to use is just to breathe and to breathe well. And if you feel the anger and emotion arising in yourself, just take a few moments to breathe deeply and to think twice before you say something. Making a pause is important, whether in an interview, in a job interview, or an academic interview, or whether in a debate. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to take your time, to calm down, and to go back to the language of logic and rather than the language of emotion.
Hopefully, you learned a lot about debating and the other topics throughout the training. We're almost there. Before we end the online training, we would still like to give you some final debating advice from different experts you saw throughout the training.
And actually, this experience tells me that, when you start debating, never judge yourself from the first experience. First experience can always be very difficult and very frustrating, and often you feel extremely bad about it. But later, when you find the courage to go back to that stage, and when you find the adrenaline to go back to debates, it becomes like a drug, a positive drug, which you can't stop taking again every single time you do it. So it's really a very engaging activity. It's a very stressful one. And I think the reason it is so engaging is that whilst you do so, you try to conquer yourself. You try to really fight with the demons within yourself, the demons of maybe fear, the demons of inferiority complex, the demons of lack of self-confidence, but also the demons of sometimes lack of respect and attention to others. Because I think in the debates, what is most important is not only to build up your own self-confidence, but to build confidence in other people and to really look for the best in other people.
It'll be a little bit provocative, but I would say be brave to ask unpleasant questions. So go for the debate equipped with the knowledge, with the arguments, insist on the answers, and keep the debate decent. That would be my advice.
I don't know if I have any specific advice. Just one general advice would be not to be afraid to ask questions. I remember when I started debating, or when I was younger, I used to be afraid of asking questions because I think that my question would be not smart enough, or not well versed, not well phrased. But obviously, this is unnecessary. These are unnecessary worries, and even if your arguments or questions are not fully prepared or fully crafted and crafted to perfection, they're still valid. They're still worth listening to, and you just shouldn't be afraid of contributing to the debate.
One tip that I would give to you for a debate is to make sure, or try to make sure at least, that you separate between the person making the argument and the argument itself. So if you are responding to somebody, the things that they are saying, don't start attacking the person. Focus on the argument, what the person is saying, and if you find fault in the argument, then point that out. But don't focus on the person themselves.
What I would advise you to is to focus on your team members and to focus on the people that you're debating. If you're going to convince them, which is your goal, you're going to convince the audience as well. So don't try to worry too much about the audience. Try to be as eloquent as possible and to just have the goal of convincing the team members on the other side who are debating against you. And the way you do that is all of the preparation that you've done, bring that into the debate. Bring all of the research that you've done into debating and convincing the other people in the opposite team. And how you do that is that you first of all listen actively to what they have to say. You can't really convince a person just going off and spitting out all of the arguments that you've prepared for. You need to listen to what they have to say and find the weak points in their argument that you could persuade them off of.
To check and also compare what they read on social media, check the origin of text, what is the source, check also the veracity of the picture. Sometimes the picture is not matching the text, it's the result of cut and paste work of somebody. So that is very important, I think, and see the difference. So orient themselves in a broad way, not be satisfied with the first source that they come across.
I think obviously during a debate in the forefront are the words that people are using. So I think words can be very powerful. So I think it's obviously you need to find the right words, and I would also sometimes say that less is more. So to try to find really good and short arguments that are very also catchy for the listeners, and not try to like waffle too much around, and then also maybe include some references to maybe some fun facts, or bring a bit of humor to the whole discussion.
Congratulations! You finished the Debate Your Issue online training. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed it.